The thought makes me want to throw up. 2 weeks after I ran, Manning gets a warrant to examine the pliers and the chair as potential evidence. He calls to tell me Dad's lawyer tried to block the search, claiming their family heirlooms protected as personal property. But the judge allowed it based on my testimony and the photographic evidence Veronica provided. Manning sounds excited in a way I haven't heard before. He says this could be the break they need. Crime scene technicians process the pliers and chair at the police lab. Manning meets me at the shelter 3 days later to explain what they found. Traces of blood and biological material on the pliers that match multiple DNA profiles. He needs samples from Mom and Claire to confirm, but this physical evidence is huge for the case. It proves the pliers were used on multiple people, which contradicts Dad's story about normal dental procedures. I ask how they'll get samples from Mom and Claire when they're still at the house. Manning says they're working on it. My first full therapy session happens that same week. The shelter has a therapist who comes twice a week, and I've been avoiding her because talking about everything feels impossible. But she sits down across from me in the small office and waits patiently until I start crying. I cry about leaving Mom and Claire behind, about running while they stayed in that house, about being safe while they're still in danger. The therapist lets me cry for a long time before she speaks. She explains that I didn't abandon them. I took the only action available to survive. And me surviving might ultimately help them too, because now there's a witness who escaped and can testify. Her words don't make the guilt disappear, but they make it slightly easier to breathe. Manning finally gets approval for a welfare check that involves a social worker instead of just patrol officers. He calls me right after they visit the house. They found Claire unresponsive and dissociated in her room. She wouldn't speak or make eye contact. The social worker determined she needs immediate mental health evaluation and called for an ambulance to transport her to a psychiatric facility. I'm relieved she's getting help, but terrified about what Dad did to her after I left. Mom gets interviewed separately during the same welfare check. Manning says she initially stuck to Dad's story about genetic dental problems and normal family discipline. But when the social worker told her Claire was hospitalized and that I was safe at an undisclosed location, Mom broke down completely. She admitted to years of abuse, described the extraction rituals, showed them her destroyed mouth, but she's terrified of the consequences of speaking up. She told them Dad will kill her if she testifies against him. Manning asks if I want to talk to Mom, but I'm not ready yet. Hunter arranges for Mom to meet with a domestic violence specialist who works with the prosecutor's office. The specialist visits Mom at the house when Dad is at work. She explains safety planning and legal protections available to abuse victims. Mom is resistant at first. Years of conditioning make her believe she deserves the abuse or that leaving is impossible. But the specialist doesn't push. She just provides information and a phone number Mom can call anytime, day or night. Manning tells me this is progress even though it doesn't feel like much. 3 weeks after my escape, Claire gets released from psychiatric hold. But she doesn't go back to Dad's house. Manning arranged for her to be placed in a therapeutic group home that specializes in trauma recovery. He calls to tell me she's stable but not ready to talk about the abuse yet. Pushing her could set back her recovery. I ask when I can see her and he says soon. The group home allows supervised visits after Claire settles in. I visit Claire 5 days later with a staff member sitting nearby in the common room. Claire looks smaller than I remember. Her hair is pulled back in a messy ponytail and she's wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that's too big for her. We sit together on a couch without talking much. She's on medication that makes her seem foggy and distant. But when I tell her I'm safe and living with Aunt Haley and Uncle Gerard, she squeezes my hand. It's a small gesture, but it feels like a connection we haven't had in years. I tell her I love her and she nods but doesn't say it back. The staff member says that's normal and not to take it personally. Manning interviews my brothers separately about the extraction rituals. He tells me their stories contradict each other in small ways that suggest they're not following a rehearsed script Dad prepared. One brother describes holding Mom's shoulders during a ceremony that happened in spring. The other brother says that same ceremony happened in fall. Small details that don't match up. Then one of my brothers admits something Manning didn't expect. He says he hated holding us down, but was afraid of becoming a target himself if he refused. Dad had threatened to extract his teeth too if he didn't participate in family discipline. Manning says this confession might be useful because it shows Dad used fear to control everyone in the house, not just the women. 2 days later, Manning calls to tell me Dad got arrested that morning at his work. The charges are assault and child endangerment based on the DNA evidence from the pliers and all the witness statements my brothers gave. His bail hearing is set for the next day, and Manning says the prosecutor is asking for a high amount because Dad has shown he's willing to use violence to control his family. I ask what happens if he makes bail, and Manning explains there will be a no-contact order that legally prevents him from coming near me or Mom or Claire. A piece of paper doesn't feel like much protection against someone who spent years pulling teeth out of people's mouths, but Manning says violating the order means immediate arrest. The bail gets set at $50,000, which sounds like a lot, but Dad's family has money from the farm they've owned for generations. Manning tells me not to worry because even if he posts bail, the no-contact order is serious and police will be watching. I want to believe him, but I've spent 17 years learning that rules don't apply to Dad the same way they apply to everyone else. The next morning, I wake up to staff members rushing around the shelter looking stressed and angry. Someone spray-painted liar in huge red letters across the front wall during the night. The shelter director pulls me aside to show me security footage on her computer, and there's a truck that looks exactly like the one my oldest brother drives circling the block 3 times before someone gets out wearing a hoodie. You can't see their face, but the way they walk reminds me of my brother, and my stomach drops because it means they know where I am. The director says they're moving me to a different shelter across town as a safety measure, and I need to pack my stuff right away. I'm so tired of being disrupted and moved around like I'm the one who did something wrong. This is the 3rd place I've stayed in 4 weeks, and I barely remember what it feels like to sleep in the same bed 2 nights in a row. The new shelter is smaller and older with peeling paint in the hallways, but the room has a window that actually opens, which the last place didn't have. Manning comes by that afternoon to check on me and brings news about a forensic dentist who examined all the photographs Veronica took of Mom's mouth plus some pictures the hospital took of Claire during her psychiatric evaluation. The dentist wrote a detailed report explaining that the damage to their teeth is consistent with traumatic extraction using pliers or similar tools. He specifically noted the fracture patterns and tissue damage that you don't see with normal tooth loss or genetic conditions. Manning says this expert testimony will counter Dad's forged medical records, because you can't fake the physical evidence of trauma. The report describes force marks on the surrounding bone structure and damage to the jaw that happens when teeth are pulled without proper technique. Reading the clinical descriptions of what Dad did to Mom and Claire makes me feel sick, but also validated because someone with credentials is finally saying this wasn't normal dental problems. 3 days after the expert report gets filed, Mom calls Manning and says she's ready to give a formal statement. He arranges for me to listen on speakerphone from his office while she talks to him, and a stenographer who types everything. Mom's voice sounds flat and distant, like she's reading someone else's story instead of her own, but she gets through the whole thing without stopping. She describes losing her first tooth on her wedding night because she cried too loud when Dad hurt her. She lists every extraction after that with dates and reasons, and her voice never changes tone even when she's talking about the worst ones. The stenographer's fingers fly across the keys, making clicking sounds that fill the silence between Mom's sentences. She talks for almost 2 hours, covering 18 years of abuse, and when she finishes, Manning thanks her and tells her she did great. After the call ends, he looks at me and says, "Mom's statement combined with the expert testimony and the physical evidence makes a strong case." Hunter files upgraded charges the next week, including aggravated assault with a weapon and child abuse, and witness intimidation based on the phone incident where Dad called Claire's phone. Dad's lawyer tries to argue the pliers are just a tool, not a weapon, but Hunter shows pictures of the pliers next to the dental damage, and explains how they were used to inflict harm. The judge denies the motion to dismiss, and sets a preliminary hearing date for 2 weeks out. Manning explains this means the case is moving forward, and Dad will have to answer to all the charges in court. A week later, I have to testify before a grand jury, which Manning says is a group of regular people who decide if there's enough evidence to indict someone. The courthouse is huge and intimidating with marble floors and high ceilings that make every sound echo. Tanner meets me in the waiting room and sits with me while I try not to throw up from nerves. He reminds me I'm just telling the truth about what happened, and the grand jury needs to hear my story to understand why Dad needs to face charges. When they call me in, I walk into a room full of strangers sitting in rows looking at me, and my hands start shaking. The prosecutor asks me questions about the pliers and the chair and the ceremonies, and I answer each one as clearly as I can. I describe the night I ran and the 10 teeth Dad planned to take, and how Mom created a distraction so I could escape. Some of the grand jury members look upset, and one woman in the back row wipes her eyes, but I keep talking because Tanner said getting through this is important. The whole testimony takes about 40 minutes, and when I'm done, the prosecutor thanks me and says I can go. Tanner is still waiting in the hallway, and he tells me I did really well, even though I felt like I was going to pass out the whole time. 2 days later, Manning calls with news that the grand jury returned indictments against Dad on multiple felony counts. They also indicted both my brothers as accomplices for their role in holding us down during the extractions. My brother's lawyer contacts Hunter immediately to negotiate a plea deal where they'll testify against Dad in exchange for reduced charges. Manning says this is good because their testimony will show the pattern of abuse and how Dad controlled the whole family through fear and violence. Claire's therapist calls me that same afternoon to say Claire had a major setback after learning about the indictments. She stopped eating 3 days ago and keeps saying Dad is going to kill her for talking to the police even though he's in jail and can't get to her. The therapist and staff are working with her around the clock, trying to help her understand the legal system is protecting her, not punishing her. They're using medication to help with her anxiety, and slowly she's starting to eat small amounts of food again. Hearing about Claire's setback makes me feel guilty for starting this whole process, even though I know rationally that running away was the only choice I had. Manning arranges for Aunt Haley and Uncle Gerard to take me in since the shelter is only meant for short-term stays. They drive down to pick me up and help me pack my few belongings into their car. The drive to the city takes 2 hours, and I watch the rural landscape turn into suburbs and then tall buildings. Their house is in a quiet neighborhood with sidewalks and streetlights and other houses close by, which feels strange after growing up isolated. They set me up in their spare bedroom and tell me to make myself at home, but I don't know how to relax in a space that feels this safe. The anonymity of the city is weird after years of living in a small town where everyone knew everyone. I catch myself looking over my shoulder when I walk to the corner store, even though nobody here knows who I am or what happened. Uncle Gerard helps me enroll in the local high school, and we meet with a counselor to figure out my credits. She pulls up my transcript on her computer and asks questions about what classes I've taken and what I still need to graduate. She doesn't ask why I transferred in the middle of the year, or make me explain my situation, which I appreciate more than sympathy would mean. We work out a schedule that will let me finish on time if I take an extra English class and do credit recovery for the weeks I missed. The counselor prints out my new schedule and a map of the school, and tells me to come find her if I need anything. Walking out of her office, I feel like maybe I can actually do this and have a normal senior year, even though nothing about my life is normal anymore. Manning calls me 2 days after I start at the new school to say Mom finally agreed to testify against Dad. She took an immunity deal in exchange for her full cooperation with the prosecution, and they're moving her into transitional housing with support services built in. The Victim Compensation Fund approved her application for dental reconstruction, which means she can start getting implants to replace the teeth Dad took over the years. Manning sounds pleased when he tells me this because Mom's testimony will be crucial for the case, and having her as a cooperative witness instead of a hostile one changes everything. He also mentions that one of my brothers accepted a plea deal that morning. The deal includes 3 years probation, mandatory therapy sessions twice a week, and testimony against Dad at trial. My other brother is still holding out and refusing to cooperate, but his lawyer keeps pressuring him because the evidence is strong, and going to trial as Dad's accomplice could mean actual prison time. Manning says the prosecutor is giving him another week to decide before they stop offering deals and proceed with full charges against both brothers. That night, I wake up at 3 in the morning soaking wet with sweat because I dreamed I was back in the chair with Dad's hands reaching for my mouth. My heart pounds so hard I can feel it in my throat, and for a few seconds I don't know where I am. Aunt Haley must hear me moving around because she appears in my doorway wearing her bathrobe and asks if I'm okay without turning on the light. I tell her I had a bad dream, and she comes in and sits on the edge of my bed without saying anything else. She doesn't ask what the dream was about or try to make me talk through it. She just sits there in the dark, being present and solid and real, until my breathing slows down and the panic fades. This becomes our routine over the next few weeks because the nightmares come back several times a week, and she always hears me and always comes to sit until I'm calm again. Manning arranges a video call so I can talk to Claire after she gets discharged from the group home to a foster family that specializes in trauma recovery. When her face appears on the screen, she looks more present than I've seen her in years. Her eyes focus on me instead of staring through me at nothing. And when I tell her about my new school and how different the city is from home, she actually smiles. It's a small smile and it doesn't last long, but seeing any expression on her face besides blank emptiness makes me want to cry. She tells me the foster family has 2 other girls who've been through bad situations, and they all eat dinner together every night and nobody yells. Her therapist sits just off camera during our call but doesn't interrupt, and Claire seems comfortable enough to keep talking for 20 minutes about small normal things like the classes she's taking and a cat the foster family has. 4 months pass faster than I expected while I settle into the routine of school and therapy and living with Aunt Haley and Uncle Gerard. Then Manning calls to say Dad's trial date is set, and I need to come back to testify in person. Tanner drives up to the city to accompany me to the courthouse, and Hunter spends 3 hours preparing me for cross-examination in a conference room that smells like old coffee. She warns me that Dad's lawyer will try to make me look like a liar who invented everything for attention or to get back at Dad for normal discipline. She tells me to stay calm no matter what he says, and just repeat the facts clearly without getting emotional or defensive. The morning I have to take the witness stand, I throw up twice before we even leave for the courthouse. Tanner stays close beside me as we walk through the metal detectors and up to the courtroom on the 3rd floor. Dad sits at the defense table in a suit I've never seen before, looking calm and almost respectable. When I walk to the witness stand, his eyes lock onto mine and I feel like I'm back in our living room about to sit in that chair. Hunter told me to focus on her face when I testify, so I force myself to look away from Dad and find her standing near the jury box. She asks me to state my name and age and then walks me through the night I ran, starting with Mom's warning and ending with hiding behind the truck. Dad's lawyer objects twice, but the judge overrules him both times. Then the defense lawyer stands up for cross-examination and suggests I'm making everything up because I was mad about normal house rules. He asks why I never told a teacher or called police before if things were really so bad. I don't get angry like he wants me to. I just explain calmly that speaking up was misbehavior worth 2 teeth, and I was too scared to risk it. He tries 3 more times to trip me up or make me contradict myself, but I stick to exactly what happened without adding or changing anything. Mom testifies after me and describes her wedding night in detail that makes 2 jurors look down at their hands. She explains how Dad heated the pliers over a candle and told her crying loudly was disrespectful to him. Her voice stays flat and emotionless like she's reading a grocery list, but when she opens her mouth to show the jury her destroyed teeth, several people shift in their seats. Dad's lawyer suggests she's lying to avoid criminal charges of her own for not protecting us, but her mouth is right there as evidence that speaks louder than any accusation he can make. The forensic dentist testifies next and brings enlarged photographs showing force marks on extracted teeth and trauma to surrounding tissue. He explains why the damage patterns couldn't possibly be caused by genetic disease or poor dental care, and points out specific indicators of violent extraction. One photograph shows a tooth root with visible tool marks, and the jury looks disturbed enough that the judge calls a brief recess. My brother, who took the plea deal, testifies about being 12 years old the first time Dad made him hold Mom's shoulders during an extraction. He cries on the stand while describing how Dad threatened to extract his teeth if he refused to help, and said real men protect family order. Watching him break down, I realized for the first time that he was a victim too, even though he hurt us. Dad controlled him through fear the same way he controlled Mom and Claire and me. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it makes me understand that Dad destroyed more than just our teeth. Claire provides her testimony through a video link from a private room at her foster home with her therapist sitting beside her just out of frame. She describes years of abuse in a voice so quiet the judge asks her twice to speak up. She's fragile but clear about specific incidents and dates. When Dad's lawyer tries to question her